I didn't know he was the Alpha King. I just knew he was ruining the inseam of a $20,000 tuxedo. When you work in high fashion, you learn to treat bodies like mannequins. If a mannequin moves, you pin it down. If a mannequin touches you, you handle it. So when the broad-shouldered giant in the VIP dressing room dared to pinch my waist while I was measuring his thigh, I didn't hesitate. I slapped him, hard, across the face. I expected to get fired. I didn't expect the room to freeze, his security to drop their jaws, and the scariest man in the world to look down at me with glowing golden eyes and say the one thing that would ruin my life. Do it again. Welcome back to the Stacks at Raven's Library. Before we open today's chapter, I want to see how far our flock has spread. Head down to the comments right now and let me know. Where in the world are you listening from? And if you're tired of waiting for the next upload, hit that join button below. Members get exclusive early access to new stories before anyone else, plus that custom badge next to your name to show you're a VIP supporter. Now, let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Needle and the Fury. Hold still, or I'll sew this zipper directly to your skin. I didn't look up. I couldn't afford to. The midnight gala was starting in 20 minutes. The air conditioning in the dressing room was broken, and the agency had sent me a replacement fit model who was evidently built like a brick wall and had the attention span of a toddler. I said still, I hissed, my mouth half full of steel pins. I was on my knees, wrestling with the left pant leg of a midnight blue tuxedo. The fabric was Italian silk, delicate enough that a harsh breeze could bruise it, and this giant of a man kept shifting his weight. Every time he moved, the hemline ruined itself. My stress levels were currently sitting somewhere between heart attack and homicide. You tense, a voice rumbled above me. It wasn't a normal voice. It was a baritone so deep, I felt the vibrations travel through the floorboards and straight into my chest. It sounded like expensive whiskey poured over gravel. I'm not tense, I mumbled around the pins, stabbing a piece of chalk against his thigh to mark the alteration. I'm a professional, and you are late. The agency said they were sending Steve at 4 o'clock. It is now 6. You're lucky I didn't greet you with a pair of fabric shears. He chuckled. The sound was dark, amused, and entirely too relaxed for a man whose inseam was currently being aggressively manhandled by a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Steve, he repeated, testing the name as if it were a foreign language. Is that who you think I am? Unless you're the catering staff sneaking in for a nap, yes. Now spread your legs, slightly. I need to check the rise. He obliged, but as he shifted his stance, his hand dropped. A large, warm palm brushed against the curve of my waist. It might have been an accident. He might have been losing his balance. But in my sleep-deprived, caffeine-fueled state, it felt like a pinch. A deliberate, flirtatious pinch from a model who thought he could get fresh just because we were alone behind a velvet curtain. I saw red. I spat the pins into my magnetic wristband, stood up in one fluid motion, and swung. Crack! My palm connected with his cheek. It wasn't a love tap. It was the kind of sharp, stinging slap I reserved for malfunctioning sewing machines and handsy interns. The sound echoed off the vanity mirrors like a gunshot. I said, stay still, I snapped, pointing a finger in his face. If you pinch me again, I will sew you into this suit and leave you here until the cleaners find you on Monday. Do you understand me, Steve? Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The man slowly turned his head back to face me. He didn't look angry. He didn't look ashamed. He looked fascinated. He was devastatingly handsome in a cruel, sharp-edged way. High cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that were currently burning a shade of molten gold. He raised a hand, his long fingers tracing the reddening outline of my handprint on his cheek. "You have a heavy hand for a seamstress," he said softly. "I like it." Before I could process the absurdity of that statement, the dressing room door burst open. 3 men in earpieces and dark suits flooded the room. They didn't look like agency handlers. They looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. The one in the lead took one look at the man rubbing his cheek and then looked at me with pure horror. "Alpha," the lead guard barked, his voice cracking. "We heard a noise. Is everything—" "Get out," the man in the tuxedo said. He didn't even look at them. His golden eyes were locked on mine. "But sir," the guard stammered, eyeing me like I was a ticking bomb. "She assaulted you. We need to—" "I said get out," the man repeated. His voice dropped an octave, rolling with a growl that made the hair on my arms stand up. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a predator warning off scavengers. "Close the door, and do not open it again unless the building is burning down." The guards didn't hesitate. They scrambled backward, the heavy door clicking shut with a terrifying finality. I stood there, my hand still stinging from the impact, my brain slowly trying to catch up with reality. Alpha? Guards? The golden eyes? The man took a step toward me. He towered over me, shrinking the room until it felt like there was no oxygen left, just his scent, cedar, rain, and something spicy and dangerous. "So," he murmured, stepping into my personal space until the toes of his polished shoes touched mine. "You think my name is Steve?" I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. My fierce stylist persona was flickering, but I refused to let it die. I lifted my chin, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I don't care who you are," I said, though my voice wasn't quite as steady as I wanted it to be. "You ruined the drape of the trousers." He smirked. It was a wicked, arrogant expression that made my knees weak and my temper flare at the same time. "I own the trousers, little tailor," he whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from my ear. "In fact, I own the building. I own the agency that sent Steve. And as of 5 minutes ago, I'm fairly certain I own you." He pulled back, his eyes dancing with a dark, obsessive hunger. "Now," he said, tapping his cheek where I'd hit him, "why don't you finish what you started? The inseam won't measure itself." Chapter 2. The Slap Heard Round the World. My heart wasn't just beating. It was trying to punch its way out of my ribcage to file a formal noise complaint. "I own you." It was a ridiculous thing to say. It was the kind of line a villain in a melodrama would say while twirling a mustache. But looking up at him, at the sheer, overwhelming mass of expensive wool and predatory grace, I didn't feel like laughing. "You can't own a person," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "The Emancipation Proclamation covered that. Read a history book." He threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a rich, dark sound that made my insides do a traitorous little flip. "I own the debt your agency holds. I own the mortgage on this theater. I own the lease on your apartment complex. I checked while you were hyperventilating over my inseam. In my world, Darcy, that is as close to ownership as it gets." He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. "My name is Ms. Barron to you," I corrected, dropping back to my knees. Not to bow, but because if I didn't finish pinning this hem, I was going to fail my assignment, and I refused to let a billionaire with a god complex ruin my perfect track record. And if you own everything, surely you can afford a tailor who doesn't want to strangle you. Why are you still standing here? Because I'm fascinated, he said. He didn't move away. In fact, as I reached for the fabric near his ankle, he took a half step closer. Most people tremble when they realize who I am. You just got angrier. It's refreshing. I didn't answer. I focused entirely on the fabric. Italian wool, super 150s, exquisite drape. If I focused on the threads, I didn't have to focus on the man. I didn't have to focus on the heat radiating off his legs, or the scent of him, like a storm about to break over a cedar forest that was filling my lungs with every breath. I pinned the cuff with surgical precision. "Turn," I ordered. To my surprise, he turned. "Lift your arms." He lifted them. For the next 5 minutes, the room was silent except for the scratch of chalk and the soft snick of my pins. It was the most terrifying 5 minutes of my life. I was painfully aware of his eyes on me. He was watching me like a wolf watches a particularly interesting rabbit, not deciding if he was going to eat it, but how much fun the chase would be. "Done," I said, standing up and brushing the chalk dust from my hands. "You can put your arms down now. And tell your security detail that if they burst in again, I'm charging you for emotional distress." He lowered his arms slowly, smoothing the lapels of the jacket. The suit fit him perfectly now. I had sculpted it to him, turning a rack garment into armor fit for a king. "You're good," he murmured, inspecting his reflection in the trifold mirror. Then his gaze shifted, meeting mine in the glass. "You're very good." "I'm the best," I said flatly, grabbing my pincushion. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Please don't recommend me to your friends. I prefer clients who don't threaten to buy me." I turned to the door, my hand reaching for the brass handle. I needed air. I needed vodka. I needed to move to a country that didn't have an extradition treaty with wherever this man came from. "Conrad," he said. I froze, my hand on the latch. "My name," he continued, his voice wrapping around me like velvet rope, "is Conrad Arthur. Since you felt comfortable enough to strike me, I thought we should be on a first-name basis." Conrad Arthur, the Alpha King, the man who controlled the entire shifter economy of the East Coast, the man whose temper was legendary and whose bank account was large enough to buy a small country. I had slapped Conrad Arthur. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked at him now, knowing what he was, I might actually pass out. "Goodbye, Mr. Arthur," I squeaked. "For now, Darcy," he replied. "For now." Chapter 3. Dead Woman Walking. I didn't just leave the gala. I evaporated. I sprinted out the service exit, dodged 3 waiters and a confused lyrical dancer, and dove into the first Uber I could find. I spent the entire 40-minute ride to my apartment staring out the window, waiting for black SUVs to run us off the road. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped so hard I nearly hit my head on the ceiling. By the time I got home, I had already mentally packed my bags. I could go to Canada. I heard Canada was nice. They had maple syrup and polite people who probably didn't own the lease to my apartment. I spent the night pacing my living room, drinking cheap wine out of a coffee mug, and aggressively Googling Conrad Arthur. The results were not comforting. Conrad Arthur acquires tech giant for $4 billion. Conrad Arthur, the Wolf of Wall Street's worst nightmare. Top 10 people you should never cross. Conrad Arthur is number 1. There were photos of him at board meetings, at galas, at PAC summits. In every single one, he looked bored, cold, and utterly untouchable. And there was me, Darcy Barron, daughter of a librarian and a mechanic, who had treated his face like a bongo drum. I fell asleep on the couch at 4 a.m. and woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It was the office. "Darcy?" It was Mr. Henderson, the owner of the bespoke fashion house where I worked. His voice sounded thin, like he was being held at gunpoint. "I need you to come in, immediately." "I'm sick," I lied, pulling a throw blanket over my head. "It's the plague, highly contagious. I shouldn't come in for at least 30 to 40 years. "Darcy, please," he whispered. "He's here." The line went dead. He's here. I stared at the phone. There was no point in running. If Conrad Arthur wanted to find me, he would find me. He was a wolf. Tracking was literally in his DNA. I took the coldest shower of my life, put on my sharpest blazer, my armor, and applied red lipstick with the precision of a war paint. If I was going down, I was going down looking expensive. The fashion house was eerily quiet when I arrived. Usually, the atelier was a chaotic symphony of sewing machines, steaming irons, and shouting. Today, it was silent. My colleagues were huddled by the fabric wall, looking pale. Mr. Henderson was standing outside his office door. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Darcy," he said, wringing his hands. "Thank God." "Mr. Henderson, look," I started, clutching my purse. "I can explain. The client was difficult. I know I shouldn't have reacted, but—" "You're not fired," he blurted out. I blinked. "I'm not?" "No," he said, swallowing hard. "I am. Or, well, I'm retired. As of this morning." He gestured vaguely to the glass-walled office behind him. The blinds were drawn, but I could see a tall, dark silhouette pacing inside. "I sold the company, Darcy," Henderson whispered, his eyes wide. "He made an offer at 8 a.m. Cash. Triple the market value. He bought the brand, the building, the inventory. Everything." My stomach dropped through the floor. Who? Who bought us? Henderson looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. "The Arthur Corporation. And the new CEO is waiting for you. He said he has a personal interest in the staff retention." "Personal interest?" I repeated, feeling the blood drain from my face. "Go on in," Henderson said, patting my shoulder as he walked past me toward the exit, carrying a cardboard box of his belongings. "Good luck, kid. You're going to need it." I stood alone in the hallway. The door to the CEO's office loomed in front of me. I took a deep breath, smoothed my blazer, and pushed the door open. He was sitting in Mr. Henderson's chair like he had been born there. The office was modest, just a glass desk, a few mannequins, and a wall of fabric swatches. But Conrad Arthur made it look like a throne room. He had discarded his tuxedo for a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my entire college education. His tie was loosened, his sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and he was spinning a silver letter opener between his fingers. He stopped spinning it when I walked in. "You're late," he said. No hello, no good morning, just the accusation. "I'm on time," I countered, closing the door behind me and refusing to lean against it for support. "Work starts at 9. It is 9:01. Technically, I'm punctual." "Technically," he said, standing up. The room suddenly felt very small. He walked around the desk, moving with that predatory grace that made my primal brain scream "run," while my modern brain whispered "stay." So, I said, crossing my arms over my chest, you bought the company. Is this your way of getting a refund on the suit adjustment? His lips quirked upward. I bought the company because I saw potential, and because the previous management was lacking in vision. He stopped in front of me, leaning back against the edge of the desk, crossing his ankles, and because I wanted to ensure my favorite stylist wasn't poached by the competition. I'm not your stylist, I said. I'm the lead tailor. I handle production, not personal shopping. Not anymore. He reached behind him, picked up a thick document from the desk, and held it out to me. Your new contract. I hesitated, then took it. I skimmed the first page. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. This salary figure has too many zeros, I murmured. It has exactly the right amount of zeros, he corrected. Look at the job title. I looked. Executive Stylist and Wardrobe Consultant to the CEO. I don't want to be your wardrobe consultant, I said, looking up at him. I design clothes. I create. I don't just pick out ties for billionaires with too much money and not enough taste. My taste is impeccable, he argued smoothly. I chose you, didn't I? I felt a flush rise up my neck. I'm not for sale, Mr. Arthur. You can buy the building, but you can't buy me. I'm not buying you, Darcy, he said, his voice dropping to that low, vibrating rumble that made my knees weak. I'm hiring you, exclusively. No other clients, no distractions, just me. He took a step closer, invading my personal space again, the scent of rain and cedar wrapped around me. Think of the challenge, he whispered. I have a coronation coming up. I have galas, summits, press conferences. I need to look like a king. And you are the only person who has ever looked at me and seen a suit that needed fixing rather than a man who needed fearing. I still think you need fixing, I shot back, though the bite was lacking in my voice. Good, he said. Then fix me. He reached out and tapped the contract in my hand. Sign it, Darcy. Or don't. But if you walk out that door, I'll just buy whatever building you work in next. I'm very persistent. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And the terrifying part was, I believed him. I looked at the contract. The money would change my life. It would pay off my parents' debts. It would fund my own line one day. But working exclusively for him, being in his pocket, in his space, every single day. Fine, I said, grabbing a pen from his desk before I could talk myself out of it. I signed my name with a flourish that was far more aggressive than necessary. But I have conditions. No touching, no creeping, and absolutely no pinching. I slammed the contract back onto his chest. He caught it before it hit the floor, his golden eyes gleaming with victory. Understood, he said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. But we'll have to test your resolve immediately. He checked his watch. My first fitting is in 10 minutes, he said, unbuttoning his suit jacket and tossing it onto the chair. His fingers moved to his tie, loosening the knot. And this time, Darcy, I expect you to be thorough. I want you to measure everything. Chapter 5. The Inseam. The sound of a silk shirt sliding off a man's shoulders should not be a weapon, but Conrad Arthur wielded it like one. He didn't just undress, he unveiled. He tossed his shirt onto the leather armchair with a casual disregard that made my tailor's heart ache, revealing a torso that looked like it had been carved out of marble and bad intentions. He was covered in faint, silver scars, Shifter marks, I assumed, that only highlighted the definition of his chest and abs. "Well?" he challenged, standing in the center of the office in nothing but his suit trousers and a smug expression. "I'm waiting, Darcy. Or do you need a step stool to reach my shoulders?" "I need a sedative," I muttered under my breath, grabbing my yellow measuring tape from my bag. "Turn around, face the window, and for the love of God, stop flexing." "I'm not flexing." He lied. He was absolutely flexing. Every time I stepped close, the muscles in his back rippled like water disturbed by a stone. I started with the shoulders. I had to step on my tiptoes, which put my chest dangerously close to his lower back. I could feel the heat radiating off him. Shifters ran hot, almost feverish compared to humans. It was like standing next to a furnace that smelled like expensive cologne and danger. 52 inches, I noted, my voice sounding professional despite the dryness in my throat. "You've broadened since the gala. Have you been stress-eating whole cows?" "Stress lifting," he corrected, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes caught mine, holding them hostage. "I have a very frustrating new employee who keeps testing my patience." "Keep moving and I'll test your reflexes with a pin," I retorted, moving the tape down to his chest. I had to wrap my arms around him to get the circumference. It was a necessary evil of the job. I'd done it 1,000 times for 1,000 clients. But none of them felt like this. As I cinched the tape across his pectorals, I could feel the heavy, rhythmic thud of his heart against his ribs. It was slow, powerful, and steady. "Breathe in," I ordered. He inhaled, his chest expanding against my forearms, trapping me against him for a split second. "Breathe out." He exhaled, a long breath that stirred the hair on the top of my head. "You have cold hands," he murmured. "And you have an ego the size of Texas. It balances out." I pulled away quickly, jotting down the numbers on my notepad to hide the fact that my hands were actually trembling. "Now," I said, dread settling in my stomach. "The waist. And the inseam." "Ah," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "The scene of the crime." "Don't make it weird, Conrad." "I'm not doing anything," he said, holding his hands up in mock surrender. "I'm just standing here, being the perfect model." I knelt down. Being on my knees in front of him felt like a tactical error. He loomed over me, a mountain of power and arrogance. I wrapped the tape around his waist, 34 inches, ridiculous, and then moved to the inner leg. "Feet apart," I commanded. He shifted his stance. I hesitated. This was the danger zone. This was where I had slapped him less than 24 hours ago. I took a breath, reached out, and pressed the metal tip of the tape against the top of his inseam. He flinched, just a fraction of an inch. A muscle in his thigh jumped under the fabric. I froze. "Did I pin you?" "No," he rasped. His voice sounded different, grittier, tighter. I looked up. He was looking down at me, his golden eyes blown wide, his pupils dilated so much they nearly swallowed the iris. He wasn't looking at me like a boss. He was looking at me like I was the only water in a desert. "Then why did you jump?" I asked, pulling the tape taut. He leaned down, his hand hovering over my shoulder before gripping the back of the chair to stop himself from touching me. "Because, Darcy," he whispered, the sound vibrating through my bones. "My heart rate doesn't spike when I'm running a corporation. It doesn't spike when I'm hunting." He paused, his gaze dropping to where my hand rested against his leg. "It only spikes when you touch me. Is it beating too fast for you? Or just fast enough?" Chapter 6. Midnight Emergency. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. I knew the exact time because I was in the middle of a dream where I was drowning in a sea of Italian silk, and the ringing was the sound of the lifeboat leaving without me. I fumbled for my phone, blinding myself with the screen light. Boss, do not answer. I swiped answer. If the building isn't on fire, I'm quitting. It's an emergency. Conrad's voice came through the line. He didn't sound panicked. He sounded awake, alert, annoyingly conscious. Define emergency, I croaked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Did you rip the tuxedo? Did you spill red wine on white linen? Did you accidentally buy another company? Wardrobe malfunction, he said succinctly. I have a flight to Tokyo in 3 hours for the Pacific Summit. I need this jacket. Get to the penthouse, now. I've sent a car. Conrad, it's 2 a.m, I groaned. Double overtime pay. He countered. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I threw on a trench coat over my pajamas, silk, not flannel, thank God, shoved my feet into boots, and grabbed my emergency sewing kit. The black SUV waiting downstairs whisked me through the empty city streets to the Arthur Tower. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. The place was ridiculous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, modern art that cost more than my organs, and enough marble to build a mausoleum. Conrad was standing by the fireplace, wearing the suit trousers and a crisp white shirt. He held the black velvet dinner jacket in his hand, looking tragic. Where's the damage? I asked, marching in with my kit, fully prepared to suture a massive tear. Did a seam burst? Did the lining shred? He held up the jacket. The button is loose. I stopped dead in my tracks. I stared at the jacket. I stared at him. A button, I repeated flatly. You woke me up, dragged me across the city, and promised double overtime for a loose button? It's the top button, he said with a straight face, crucial for structural integrity. You have 10 other jackets, I yelled, throwing my hands up. You have a closet the size of a department store. I wanted this one, he shrugged, handing it to me. Fix it, Baron. You're on the clock. I snatched the jacket from him, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. I sat on his pristine white sofa, threaded a needle with aggressive precision, and reinforced the button. It took me exactly 90 seconds. Done, I snapped, biting the thread because I was too angry to find my scissors. That will be $500, please. Put it on my tab, he said. He walked over to the wet bar. Drink? No, I'm going back to bed. It's bourbon, he tempted. Pappy Van Winkle, 20 years. I paused. I had principles, but I also had a weakness for expensive whiskey. 1 glass, then I'm leaving. He poured 2 glasses and walked over, handing me one. He didn't sit on the other sofa. He sat on the coffee table in front of me, his knees bumping mine. Up close, I saw what the dim light had hidden. There were dark circles under his eyes. The tension in his shoulders was coiled tight. He looked exhausted. You didn't call me for the button, I realized, taking a sip of the liquid gold. He swirled his glass, watching the amber liquid. I haven't slept in 3 days. The summit preparation is loud in my head. And I help because you're loud too, he said, looking up at me with a half smile. But you're a different kind of loud. You don't want anything from me. You just want me to stand still. He took a drink, his eyes locking on mine over the rim of the glass. Wolf senses are hypersensitive, he explained quietly. Silence is the loudest thing in the world to me. It echoes. But you smell like vanilla and frustration. It grounds me. I didn't know what to say to that. I should have made a sarcastic comment. I should have left. But instead, I watched him finish his drink. "Go to sleep, Conrad," I said softly. "I can't," he admitted. "Not unless I know the button is secure." "The button is fine," I promised. "Good." He leaned forward, his face inches from mine, his voice dropping to a whisper that curled around my spine. "Because I intend to sleep on the plane. But right now, I'm enjoying the view too much to close my eyes." Chapter 7. The Wolf in the Boardroom. "I am a tailor," I hissed, chasing Conrad down the corridor of the Arthur Corporation headquarters. "I sew, I design, I measure. I do not do corporate aesthetics consulting." "You have an eye for detail," Conrad replied, not slowing his stride. He was in full alpha mode today. Three-piece suit, power tie, and an aura that made junior executives dive into cubicles to avoid him. "We are meeting with the Sterling Pack regarding a textile merger. I need you to assess their fabric quality. If they're selling us cheap polyester blends disguised as silk, I need to know." "You can't just tell by touching it?" "I can," he said, stopping at the double doors of the boardroom. "But I like watching you destroy people who think they can fool you." He pushed the doors open. The room was filled with men in gray suits. At the head of the table sat Alpha Sterling, a man with too much hair gel and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Alpha Arthur," Sterling boomed, standing up. "We were expecting you alone." His eyes slid to me. He didn't look at my face. He looked at my legs, then my chest, then dismissed me entirely. "I didn't know you brought entertainment," Sterling smirked, sitting back down. "Though I suppose long meetings can get boring. She's cute. A bit small for a shifter, though. Is she a pet?" The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in a single second. Conrad didn't move. He didn't growl. He simply stopped walking. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Every other person in the room stopped breathing. "Excuse me?" I said, stepping out from behind Conrad. "I am the executive director of style for this corporation, and based on the shine of your suit, Alpha Sterling, you're wearing a 60-40 polyester blend that is currently suffocating your pores. I'm surprised you haven't broken out in a rash yet." Sterling's face turned a violent shade of red. "Watch your mouth, sweetheart. I don't speak to the hired help." "She isn't help," Conrad said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. He walked to the head of the table, pulled out a chair, and looked at me. "Sit, Darcy." I sat. Conrad didn't sit. He stood behind my chair, placing both hands on the backrest, looming over me like a dark guardian. He looked directly at Sterling. "This is Ms. Barron," Conrad said, his voice ice cold. "She is the only person in this room whose opinion I value. If she says your fabric is trash, then your fabric is trash, and if you ever look at her with anything other than absolute respect again, I will dissolve this merger, buy your company, and turn your headquarters into a parking lot." Sterling paled. He looked at Conrad, then at me, realizing his mistake. My apologies, Ms. Barron. I didn't realize." "Apology accepted," Conrad answered for me. He leaned down, his mouth brushing my ear, his hand sliding from the chair to rest possessively on the small of my back. His thumb traced the curve of my spine through my blazer, a touch that branded me in front of 12 witnesses. "Tell them what you think of the samples, Darcy," he commanded softly, his golden eyes scanning the room, daring anyone to interrupt. "And don't be gentle. I love it when you're mean." Chapter 8. Rumors and Red Satin. I didn't destroy the Sterling Pack's textile samples. I annihilated them. By the time I was finished explaining why their luxury silk was actually a highly flammable polyester blend that would melt under a hairdryer, Alpha Sterling looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and die. I walked out of that boardroom feeling invincible. That feeling lasted exactly 45 minutes. It took less than an hour for the photo to go viral. I was sitting at my desk, innocently trying to source a specific shade of emerald velvet, when my phone started vibrating so hard it nearly walked itself off the table. I picked it up and saw a notification from a shifter gossip blog I didn't even follow. The Alpha's new flame? King Conrad spots getting handsy with human employee. I clicked the link. My stomach turned to lead. There was a high-resolution photo of us in the boardroom. It was taken from the side, capturing the exact moment Conrad had placed his hand on the small of my back. But in the photo, it didn't look like a protective gesture. The way he was leaning down, the way his lips were brushing my ear, the way his large hand seemed to encompass my entire waist. It looked intimate. It looked possessive. It looked like we were 5 seconds away from ripping each other's clothes off on the mahogany table. "Oh no," I whispered. "Oh, absolutely not." I grabbed the tablet and marched straight to the elevator. I didn't knock when I reached the penthouse floor. I stormed into his office, waving the tablet like a weapon. "Have you seen this?" I demanded. Conrad was on a call. He held up a finger, finished his sentence in fluent Japanese, and hung up. He looked at me, then at the tablet, then back at me. He didn't look upset. He looked like a cat who had just found a particularly comfortable sunbeam. "The lighting is excellent," he noted. "It captures my good side." "It captures your hand on my ass, Conrad," I yelled. "Look at the caption. The tailor who tamed the king. They think I'm your mistress. My professional reputation is going to be shredded. No one is going to hire me for my designs. They're going to hire me because they think I know what you look like naked." He stood up, walking around the desk with maddening slowness. "And do you?" "Do I what?" "Know what I look like naked?" "I know what your inseam is," I snapped, which is frankly more information than I ever wanted. "You have to fix this. Issue a statement. Tell them I am a highly qualified executive, not your flavor of the month." He stopped in front of me, taking the tablet from my shaking hands and setting it aside. "I don't issue statements to tabloids, Darcy. It makes me look defensive. Kings don't explain themselves." "Well, tailors do." I poked him in the chest. It was like poking a steel door. "I have a mother, Conrad. She has Google. Do you want to explain to Mrs. Barron why her daughter is trending next to the hashtag Alpha King Seduction?" He laughed. He actually laughed. He caught my finger, holding it against his chest. "Fine," he relented, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "We'll clear the air. We'll go to lunch. A very public, very boring business lunch. We will discuss fabric swatches and quarterly projections where everyone can see us. Will that satisfy you?" "Yes," I said, pulling my hand back. "Somewhere with bright lights and zero atmosphere. And you will sit on the opposite side of the table." "As you wish." He took me to Le Monde. It was the most expensive restaurant in this city, entirely made of glass, and currently packed with the shifter elite. As we walked in, the room went silent. Every eye was on us. True to his word, Conrad sat across from me. But that was the only concession he made. He didn't look at the menu. He looked at me. He ordered for me without asking, steak, rare, red wine, and spent the entire meal watching me eat with an intensity that made the food taste like ash. "Stop staring," I hissed, sawing at my steak. "We are supposed to look like colleagues." "I am looking at my employee," he said smoothly, loud enough for the table next to us to hear. Then he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm just admiring how fierce you look when you're terrified." "I'm not terrified. I'm homicidal." "Eat your steak, Darcy. You need the iron." When we left, a swarm of paparazzi was waiting. Flashbulbs blinded me. Microphones were shoved in my face. "Alpha Arthur, is it true she's your mate?" "Ms. Barron, are you pregnant?" "Conrad, is she the future queen?" I froze, blinded and overwhelmed. I felt the panic rising in my throat. Then, suddenly, the world went dark. Conrad had stepped in front of me. He blocked the cameras, his broad back creating a wall between me and the chaos. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, tight, protective, undeniable, and guided me toward the waiting car. "Back off," he growled at the press. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrational threat that shattered the lenses of 2 cameras in the front row. He shoved me gently into the back seat and climbed in after me. As the door slammed shut, cutting off the noise, I let out a shaky breath. "You made it worse," I accused, though my voice lacked heat. "You hugged me. Now they're going to think we're eloping." Conrad leaned back against the leather seat, loosening his tie. He turned to look at me, his eyes gleaming in the shadows of the tinted windows. "Let them talk, Darcy," he murmured. "Truth is usually much more interesting than fiction anyway." Chapter 9. Scent of a Woman. It was raining, a cold, miserable rain that battered against the glass roof of the atelier. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was the only person left in the building. I was currently buried under a mountain of emerald velvet, trying to drape a gown for a fickle she-wolf duchess who had changed her mind about the neckline 4 times in 3 days. My back ached. My eyes burned. I hadn't eaten since the disastrous lunch with Conrad 2 days ago, where he had essentially declared war on the paparazzi by cuddling me. I stabbed a pin into the velvet dummy a little too aggressively. "Careful," a voice said from the shadows. "That mannequin didn't hurt you." I jumped, dropping my pincushion. Conrad was leaning against the doorframe. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up. He held a brown paper bag that smelled like heaven: grease, salt, and burgers. "You're stalking me," I said, rubbing my temples. "Don't you have a kingdom to run? A moon to howl at?" "I have a hungry stylist who forgets to eat when she's manic," he replied, walking into the room. He set the bag on my cutting table, sweeping a pile of sketches onto the floor without a second thought. "Hey," I protested, "those were concepts." "Eat," he ordered, pulling out a burger wrapped in foil. "Then draw." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him to get out of my sanctuary. But the smell of the burger hit my nose, and my stomach let out a traitorous growl that echoed in the empty room. I grabbed the burger and took a bite. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Conrad watched me too, leaning his hip against the table, his arms crossed. "You smell like cortisol," he said suddenly. I swallowed. "Excuse me?" "Stress," he clarified, "and exhaustion. It's sour. It's coming off you in waves. It's giving me a headache." "I'm sorry my misery is inconveniencing your olfactory system," I snapped, taking another bite. "Maybe if my boss didn't demand a 20-piece couture collection in 2 weeks, I'd smell like roses." "Your boss is a tyrant," he agreed. "Turn around." "Why?" "Just turn around, Darcy." I sighed, put the burger down, and turned my back to him. I expected him to critique the dress on the mannequin. Instead, I felt warm, large hands land on my shoulders. I stiffened, Conrad, the contract says no touching. This is medical. He lied effortlessly. You're carrying so much tension in your trapezius muscles that I'm surprised you can turn your head. He dug his thumbs into the knot at the base of my neck. I gasped. It hurt, a sharp, stinging pain, but then he began to knead. His hands were incredibly strong, his thumbs finding every pressure point with supernatural precision. Relax, he commanded, his voice right at my ear. Let me take it. Take what? I breathed, my head falling forward involuntarily. The weight, he whispered. He worked his way down my spine, his fingers firm and rhythmic. It was intimate, too intimate. It wasn't sexual, and yet it was the most erotic thing that had ever happened to me. I was melting under his touch, my defenses crumbling like wet tissue paper. You smell better now, he murmured after a few minutes. His hands slowed, his thumbs tracing the line of my collarbone through my blouse. Yeah? I whispered, my eyes closed, my brain fuzzy. What do I smell like? He didn't answer immediately. I felt him lean closer. I felt the heat of his body pressing against my back. I felt his breath, hot and ragged, against the sensitive skin of my neck where my hair was piled up. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering drag of air that sounded dangerously like a growl. Vanilla, he rasped, his nose grazing my skin. Rain and surrender. I froze. The word hung in the air between us. Surrender. He lingered there for a second too long, his lips ghosting over the pulse point behind my ear. My heart hammered against my ribs, pounding a rhythm that I knew he could hear. Then, abruptly, he pulled away. The loss of his heat was a physical shock. Finish your burger, he said, his voice rough. He was already walking toward the door, not looking back. And go home, Darcy, before I forget that I'm supposed to be a gentleman. The X Factor. The next morning, the peace was shattered by a hurricane in Louboutins. I was in the fitting room, prepping for a scheduled consultation with a high-profile client Conrad's assistant had booked. I expected a diplomat or a CEO. Instead, the door swung open, and in walked Lady Clarissa. I knew who she was. Everyone knew who she was. She was the daughter of the alpha of the Southern Pack, a stunningly beautiful she-wolf with platinum blonde hair, legs that went on for days, and a reputation for shredding anyone who got in her way. She was also, according to the tabloids, the front-runner to be Conrad's queen before I came along. She didn't come alone. She brought an entourage of 3 giggling women who looked at my atelier like it was a dumpster. So, Clarissa said, dropping her Hermes bag on a chair. She looked me up and down, her lip curling in distaste. This is the human pet everyone is talking about. I straightened my spine, clutching my clipboard. Good morning, Lady Clarissa. I assume you're here for the fitting? I'm here to see if you're incompetent, she corrected. She walked over to a rack of gowns I had pulled for her. She flicked through them aggressively. Ugly, drab, cheap. Is this really the best Conrad could find? A human seamstress with no taste? I assure you, my taste is impeccable, I said coolly. Those gowns were selected based on your coloring. My coloring is perfect, she snapped. I want red, bright, blood red, like a queen. Red washes you out, I said instantly. With your platinum hair and cool undertones, bright red will make you look consumptive. You need jewel tones, sapphire, emerald, amethyst. Clarissa laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. Listen to her, thinking she knows better than a purebred wolf. Do you know who I am? I have been bred to rule. You are here to hem pants. Do not speak to me about color theory, little human. Just fetch me a red dress and try not to trip over your own feet." Her entourage giggled. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the pet comment. Maybe it was the disrespect to my craft. "Lady Clarissa," I said, stepping forward. My voice was calm, projected, and laced with professional venom. "I don't care about your breeding. I care about physics and optics. And the physics of your body type suggest that a bias-cut red silk gown will not only make you look jaundiced, but it will also highlight the fact that your hips are slightly uneven, likely from a childhood injury you never corrected." The room went dead silent. Clarissa's mouth dropped open. "Furthermore," I continued, relentless, "you have a short torso. If I put you in the silhouette you're demanding, you will look like a box of Valentine's chocolates wrapped by a toddler. I am paid to make the king look good. That means making the people standing next to him look good. If you want to look like a disastrous mistake, you can go to the mall. But in my studio, you wear what I tell you to wear. Or you can leave." Clarissa looked like I had just slapped her. Her face turned a violent shade of purple. You insolent little—" She raised a hand, her nails lengthening into claws. "I wouldn't." A deep voice rumbled from the doorway. We all spun around. Conrad was leaning against the doorframe. He had been there the whole time. Clarissa's hand dropped instantly. Her face transformed into a mask of sweet innocence. "Conrad, darling, I was just telling your employee that her suggestions were a bit—" "I heard every word," Conrad said. He walked into the room, ignoring Clarissa entirely, and coming to stand next to me. He didn't look at her, he looked at me, and he was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile, it was a proud smile. "She's right about the hips," Conrad drawled, looking at Clarissa now. "You always did walk a little crooked, Clarissa." Clarissa gasped, humiliated. "Conrad!" "Get out," he said simply, "and take your friends with you. If you need a dress for the coronation, I suggest you try a department store. Darcy is exclusive, and she doesn't work with amateurs." Clarissa let out a sound of pure rage, grabbed her bag, and stormed out, her entourage scrambling after her. The door slammed shut. I let out a breath I had been holding, my knees suddenly shaking. I looked up at Conrad. I think I just alienated the entire Southern pack. Conrad looked down at me. His eyes were dark, swirling with something that looked dangerously like adoration. "One were magnificent," he whispered. "I've never seen anyone talk to her like that." He reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered on my cheek. "I was worried she would eat you alive," he murmured. "But I forgot. You're the one with the teeth." He stepped closer, crowding me against the cutting table. "I think," he said, his voice dropping to a growl, "that I am going to have a very hard time letting you go, Darcy Barron." Chapter 11. The Accidental Command. The week before the coronation was not a schedule. It was a hostage situation. My clipboard had become an extension of my arm. My coffee consumption had reached levels that would kill a small horse. And Conrad Arthur was currently being the most obstinate, difficult, and frustrating creature on God's green earth. "I am not wearing the cape," Conrad declared. We were in his executive office, which had been converted into a makeshift staging area. Racks of clothes lined the walls. 3 assistants were cowering in the corner, holding shoe boxes like shields. Conrad was pacing back and forth, shirtless, wearing only the ceremonial trousers, looking like a caged tiger who wanted to bite someone. "It is not a cape," I argued, chasing him with a pincushion strapped to my wrist. "It is a ceremonial mantle. It is velvet. It is embroidered with the history of your pack, and you have to wear it because it is tradition." "It looks like a rug," he growled, turning sharply and nearly knocking over a mannequin. "I look like a magician. I refuse." "You look like a king!" I yelled, losing my patience. "Will you stop pacing? I need to check the break on the trousers." "I don't have time for trousers," he roared back, his voice vibrating with alpha power. "I have a security briefing in 5 minutes. The Western Pack is demanding a renegotiation. I cannot be standing here playing dress-up while my territory is—" He was shouting. The assistants were trembling. The energy in the room was sharp, jagged, and chaotic. He was spiraling, his wolf instincts reacting to the stress by needing to move, to hunt, to fight. I didn't think. I just reacted. I slammed my clipboard down on the mahogany desk. The crack was loud enough to cut through the noise. I took 2 steps toward him, pointed my finger at the floor, and dropped my voice into the lowest, sternest register I possessed. The voice my mother used when I broke a vase, the voice I used on interns who dropped coffee on silk. "Conrad Arthur!" I barked. "Sit down!" The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Conrad didn't just stop moving. His knees buckled. He dropped into the leather chair behind him with a heavy thud, his hands gripping the armrests. His spine snapped straight, his chin lifted, and he went completely, utterly still. The room went silent. The assistants stopped breathing. I stood there, my fingers still pointing, my heart hammering in my throat. I stared at him. He stared at me. His eyes were blown wide, the gold consuming the iris. He looked stunned, dazed, like someone had just hit him with a taser. I whispered, my hand slowly lowering. "Did you just—" He blinked slowly. He looked down at his own legs, as if surprised to find them sitting. Then he looked back up at me. The anger was gone from his face. In its place was something darker, heavier. He wasn't mad. He looked high. "You used the voice," he rasped. "I don't have a voice," I stammered, backing up a step. "I'm human. Humans don't have alpha voices." "You do," he countered, his voice rough. He gripped the arms of the chair so hard the leather creaked. "You commanded me, and my wolf listened." He stood up slowly. This time he didn't pace. He stalked toward me. The assistants sensed the shift in the air and bolted, scrambling out of the room and slamming the door behind them. Conrad didn't stop until he was towering over me, breathing hard. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he was desperate to solve. "I obey no one," he whispered, leaning down until our noses brushed. "No one orders me. Not my father, not the council, no one." He reached out, his hand wrapping around my neck, not to choke, but to hold, his thumb resting against my racing pulse. "Do it again," he demanded softly. "What?" "Order me," he groaned, his forehead resting against mine. "Tell me to shut up. Tell me to sit. Tell me to beg. I want to hear it." Chapter 12. The Gift. I did not order him to beg. I fled. I muttered something about needing to check the inventory list and practically ran out of his office. I spent the next 4 hours hiding in the fabric archives, reorganizing buttons by size and color, trying to stop my hands from shaking. My wolf listened. The way he had looked at me, dazed, hungry, submissive yet dominant all at once, was burned into my retinas. It was dangerous. We were crossing a line that shouldn't even exist. I avoided him for the rest of the day, but you can't avoid a man who owns the building. At 6 p.m., just as I was packing up my bag to sneak out the back exit, Conrad appeared. He was fully dressed now, back in his armor of a charcoal suit. He looked calm, composed, the incident from the morning locked away behind his CEO mask. "Come with me," he said. "I'm going home," I lied, clutching my purse. "I have a cat to feed." "You don't have a cat," he said, holding the door open. "I checked your lease agreement. No pets allowed. Come with me, Darcy. I have something to show you." He led me to the elevator, but instead of hitting the button for the lobby, he pressed a button I had never seen before, a blank key at the top of the panel. The elevator shot upward, past the penthouse, past the executive suites. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching the floor numbers blur. "The roof? Are you going to throw me off because I yelled at you?" "Tempting," he smirked, "but no." The doors slid open. We weren't on the roof. We were in a vast, open-concept loft with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the entire city. The space was flooded with the golden light of the setting sun. But it wasn't the view that stopped my heart. It was what was inside. It was a studio. My studio. There were 3 industrial sewing machines, the top-of-the-line German models I had drooled over in catalogs but could never afford. There was a cutting table made of reclaimed oak that spanned 20 feet. There were dress forms in every size, and against the far wall, there were shelves stacked floor to ceiling with bolts of fabric. I walked forward, in a trance. I reached out and touched a bolt of blue silk. It wasn't just any silk. It was Lyon silk, woven by the last traditional mill in France. "And this," Conrad said, walking to a small table in the corner. He picked up a bolt of soft, caramel-colored wool. "Vicuña. You mentioned once that you wanted to make a coat out of it, but it was too expensive to source." I turned to look at him. My eyes were stinging. I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. "Conrad," I whispered, This is a fortune. The machines alone. The vicuña." "I don't care about the cost," he said quietly, leaning against the table, watching me explore the room. "I care about the craft. You're cramped in that basement atelier. You're working with scraps. I wanted to see what you could do if you had everything you ever wanted." He walked over to me and held out a key card. It was black, with my name embossed in silver. "It's yours," he said. "The deed is in your name, independent of the company. Even if you quit tomorrow, even if you never speak to me again, this room belongs to you." I looked at the key, then at him. This wasn't a rich man buying a gift to impress a date. This was specific. It was thoughtful. He had listened to every offhand comment I had made about thread counts and machine tension. He had built me a sanctuary. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek, his thumb brushing away a single tear that had escaped. "Because," he murmured, "you're the only person who sees me as a man, not a king. And I wanted you to have a place where you could be a queen." I took the key. My fingers brushed his. The spark that jumped between us was electric, undeniable. I knew in that moment that I was in catastrophic trouble. I wasn't just attracted to him, I was falling in love with him. And that was the most dangerous thing I could possibly do. Chapter 13. The Almost. We stayed in the studio for hours. I couldn't leave. I was like a kid in a candy store, touching every fabric, testing the machines, explaining to Conrad the difference between a serger and a cover stitch. He just listened, leaning against the wall, watching me with that intense, focused silence that made my skin prickle. Then, the sky broke. A summer storm rolled in over the city, heavy and sudden. Thunder shook the glass walls, and rain lashed against the windows in sheets. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then the entire building plunged into darkness. "Power grid failure," Conrad announced calmly from the dark. "The storm must have hit a substation." "Great," I said, freezing by the cutting table. "I'm in a dark room with a wolf. This is how horror movies start." A soft light bloomed. Conrad had turned on the flashlight of his phone. He set it face down on the table, casting a diffuse ambient glow upwards. It threw long shadows across the room, turning the studio into something intimate and enclosed. The world outside, the city, the paparazzi, the coronation, disappeared. "You're not afraid of me," Conrad said. He moved toward me. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the glint of his eyes and the outline of his broad shoulders. "I should be," I whispered. "You're an apex predator. You run the world. You have claws." "I would never use them on you," he said. He was close now, too close. He trapped me against the edge of the oak table, placing his hands on either side of my hips. He didn't touch me, but he caged me. "You command me, remember?" he murmured, his voice low and rough. "You say sit, I sit. You say stay, I stay." "Conrad." "Tell me what to do now, Darcy." He leaned down. His face was inches from mine. I could feel the heat of his body, smell the rain and cedar on his skin. His gaze dropped to my lips. The air between us was thick, charged with a tension that had been building since the moment I slapped him. I wanted him. God, I wanted him. I wanted to grab his lapels and pull him down. I wanted to ruin the suit I had spent hours perfecting. But panic flared in my chest. He was a king. I was a tailor. If I crossed this line, there was no going back. I would be consumed. I would be the human pet everyone said I was. "No," I whispered, turning my head away just as his lips brushed my cheek. He froze. "I can't," I said, my voice shaking. "I work for you, Conrad. I'm just the help. This is just adrenaline. It's not real." I pushed against his chest. It was like pushing a stone wall, but he let me move him. He stepped back, giving me space. The loss of his warmth was immediate and painful. "It's real," he said. His voice wasn't angry, but it was laced with a dark, terrifying certainty. He picked up his phone, killing the soft light and plunging us back into darkness. "Go," he said from the shadows. "The emergency generators will kick in any second. The elevators will work. Run home, Darcy." I grabbed my purse, stumbling toward the door. I paused at the threshold, looking back into the dark. "Conrad?" "Run," he warned, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. "Because if you stay, I'm not going to let you say no again. I'm a hunter, Darcy, and I'm done playing with my food." Chapter 14. The Cold Shoulder. I didn't run because I was weak. I ran because I was smart. Self-preservation is a basic human instinct, right next to breathing and not poking sleeping bears. And Conrad Arthur was a bear in a bespoke Italian suit who had looked at me in the dark with eyes that promised to devour me whole. So naturally, I did the only logical thing a professional woman in my position could do. I hid. I spent the next morning in the basement of the old atelier, not the glorious new studio he had gifted me, but the cramped, dusty room where it all began. I was aggressively color-coding buttons, trying to convince myself that my heart wasn't shattered. Today was the final fitting. The coronation was tomorrow. This was the most important appointment of the entire contract. The suit, a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet and black satin, was hanging on the rack, pressed and perfect. But I wasn't going to fit him. "Marcus," I said, handing the garment bag to my trembling assistant. "You have the measurements, you have the pins, you have the panic button on your phone. Go." Marcus, a 22-year-old fashion student who weighed 140 pounds soaking wet, looked at me like I was sending him to the gallows. "But, Darcy," he stammered, hugging the garment bag to his chest. "He asked for you, specifically. The memo said Ms. Barron only. If I show up, he might actually eat me." "He doesn't eat people, Marcus. That's a stereotype. He's a CEO. He eats mergers and acquisitions. Now go. I have a migraine, a contagious migraine." I pushed him out the door and locked it. I waited. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30. I was just starting to relax, thinking maybe I had gotten away with it, when my phone rang. It wasn't Conrad. It was Marcus. I answered. "How did it go?" He's looking at me," Marcus whispered. He sounded like he was crying. "He's not saying anything, Darcy. He's just staring at the door. I tried to measure his inseam, and he growled. I think I peed a little." "Put him on the phone," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I can't," Marcus squeaked. "He just crushed the phone. Oh, God, he's coming over here. Darcy, help." The line went dead. 5 seconds later, my own phone rang again. This time, the caller ID simply read, "him." I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking. I swiped answer and held the phone to my ear, not saying a word. "You have exactly 20 minutes. Conrad's voice came through the line. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't growling. His voice was cold, arctic. It was the voice of a king who had been denied his tribute. "Conrad, I'm not feeling well," I lied, my voice thin. "Marcus is fully qualified to—" "Marcus is currently crying in the hallway," Conrad interrupted, his tone devoid of sympathy. "If you are not in this penthouse in 20 minutes, Darcy, I will come down there. And if I have to come down there, I won't be coming to get the suit. I'll be coming to get you." Is that a threat? I tried to inject some of my usual fire into the question, but it flickered. "It's a schedule," he replied. "Clock is ticking, little Taylor." He hung up. I stared at the phone. I looked at the door. I looked at the exit sign. I could run. I could move to Mexico. I could change my name to Brenda and sell tacos on a beach. But then I looked at the suit on the rack, the backup jacket I had kept just in case. It was my work, my art, and I refused to let anyone, even a terrifyingly attractive wolf king, intimidate me out of finishing my job. I grabbed the jacket. I grabbed my pincushion. I grabbed my courage. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "You want a fitting? I'll give you a fitting." Chapter 15. The Final Fitting. The penthouse was silent when I arrived. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and impending storm. Conrad's scent. Marcus was gone. The security guards were gone. The heavy double doors to the dressing room were slightly ajar. I pushed them open. Conrad was standing in front of the trifold mirrors. He wasn't wearing the shirt Marcus had tried to put on him. He wasn't wearing anything above the waist. He stood there in just the black dress trousers, his back to me, the muscles of his shoulders shifting like tectonic plates as he adjusted his cufflinks. "You're late," he said to my reflection in the glass. "I had to take the stairs," I retorted, dropping my bag on the velvet ottoman. since you apparently terrified the elevator operator." He turned around slowly. The sight of him hit me like a physical blow. He was magnificent. Terrifying, yes, but magnificent. The scars on his chest, the breadth of his shoulders, the dark line of hair disappearing into his waistband. It was unfair. "Marcus was incompetent," Conrad said, walking toward me. He had cold hands, and he smelled like fear. It was insulting. "He's an intern, Conrad. He's supposed to smell like fear." I pulled out my measuring tape, snapping it taut to hide the tremble in my fingers. "Put the shirt on. We have 30 minutes to finalize the fit before the press arrives." "No." "Excuse me?" "No shirt," he said, stopping 2 feet in front of me. "Check the trousers first. The waist feels loose." "The waist is perfect," I argued. "I measured it myself 3 days ago." "I lost weight," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Pining." My breath hitched. "Stop it." "Stop what?" "Stop flirting. Stop looking at me like I'm dinner. Stop making this personal." I stepped forward, angry now. "This is a job, Conrad. I am your employee. You are the king. We are not whatever this is." "And what is this, Darcy?" He stepped into my space, forcing me to back up. "Why did you run last night?" "Because you told me to!" I yelled, backing up again. "You told me to run because you're a hunter." "I told you to run because I was losing control," he growled, matching my step for step. "And instead of running away, you sent a boy to do a woman's job." I hit the wall. Or rather, I hit the mirrors. The cold glass pressed against my back. There was nowhere left to go. Conrad loomed over me, placing his hands on the glass on either side of my head, caging me in. He wasn't touching me, but he was everywhere. His heat, his scent, his overwhelming presence. "Put the shirt on," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please." "Make me," he challenged. He leaned down, his nose brushing mine. "Order me, Darcy. Use that voice. Tell me to get dressed. Tell me to leave you alone. Tell me you don't want this." "I don't," I lied. "I don't want this. I just want to finish the suit." "Liar," he murmured. His gaze dropped to my lips. "Your heart is beating so fast I can hear it echoing in the room. You're not scared of me. You're scared of how much you want me." "You're arrogant," I snapped, placing my hands on his bare chest to push him away. "And you're annoying, and I am trying to work." I pushed him. He didn't budge. He just smirked, that wicked, knowing smirk that made me want to scream. "Back off!" I yelled, frustration boiling over. I shoved him harder, my palms slipping on his skin. "I thought you were pinching me that first night. I thought you were just some handsy jerk." Conrad froze. The smirk vanished. His eyes darkened, the gold consuming everything, turning his gaze into 2 pools of molten lava. He caught my wrists. His grip was iron tight, pinning my hands against the glass above my head. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, his voice a low, rough vibration that shattered the last of my defenses. "You thought I was pinching you then," he whispered, his body pressing flush against mine. "No, Darcy. Now I will." Chapter 16. The Breach. He didn't pinch me. He claimed me. His hand left the glass and dropped to my waist, gripping me with a possessiveness that bordered on bruising. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polite. It was a declaration of ownership. His fingers dug into my hip, pulling me off the mirror and flush against his body until there wasn't even a molecule of air between us. I gasped, my head falling back, and that was all the invitation he needed. Conrad kissed me. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't soft music and fading lights. It was a collision. It was hunger and desperation and days of pent-up madness crashing together. His mouth devoured mine, demanding, taking, tasting. He kissed me like he was starving, and I was the only sustenance left in the world. And God help me, I kissed him back. I forgot the contract. I forgot the coronation. I forgot that he was a king and I was a tailor. I wrenched my hands free from his grip and tangled them in his hair, pulling him closer, anchoring him to me. He groaned, a guttural, animal sound that vibrated against my lips. He lifted me effortlessly, pressing me back against the mirror so that my feet dangled off the floor. I wrapped my legs around his waist, needing to be closer, needing to feel every inch of him. "Darcy," he rasped against my mouth, breaking the kiss for a fraction of a second to breathe. "Mine." "Conrad," I breathed, my voice wrecked. "The suit, the fitting." "Burn the suit," he growled, attacking my neck. "I don't care. I don't care about the crown. I don't care about the pack. I only care about this. You. Here." He bit gently at the sensitive cord of my neck, and a jolt of electricity shot straight to my toes. My wolf, the non-existent human instinct inside me, howled in answer. "I tried," I whispered, clutching his shoulders. "I tried to be professional." "You failed," he murmured against my skin. He pulled back, holding my face in his large hands, forcing me to look at him. His eyes were wild, his hair was a mess, his chest was heaving. He looked undone. And knowing that I, Darcy Barron, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, had unraveled the Alpha King, was the most intoxicating feeling in the world. "I don't want a stylist," Conrad said, his voice fierce and raw. "I have 1,000 people who can dress me. I have 1,000,000 people who fear me. But I have never had anyone who stood up to me." He rested his forehead against mine, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "When you slapped me," he confessed, a jagged laugh escaping his throat, "I thought I was hallucinating. No one touches me. No one. And then you looked at me with those furious eyes and told me to stay still. Darcy, I was yours before the slap even registered." "I thought you were going to kill me," I admitted, breathless. "I wanted to keep you," he corrected. "I still do. I always will." He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, a seal, a promise. "The coronation is tomorrow," he whispered against my lips. "I know," I said. "The suit is ready, if you just put it on." "I'm not talking about the suit." He set me down gently, smoothing my hair, though his eyes never left mine. "Every alpha brings a date, a partner, a potential queen." I froze. The reality of the world crashed back in. "Conrad, I'm human. The council, the press, weighty Clarissa." "To hell with Clarissa," he snarled softly, "and to hell with the council." He took my hand, lifting it to his lips, kissing my knuckles, the same knuckles that had slapped him days ago. "I'm not asking my stylist to fix my hem," he said, his voice ringing with the absolute authority of a king. "I'm asking Darcy Barron to be by my side. Walk in with me, not behind me, with me." He waited, watching me with that intense golden gaze. The king of the wolves was asking, waiting for an order. "Well?" he asked, a crooked, vulnerable smile touching his lips. "What's the verdict, Ms. Barron? Are you going to leave me standing here alone, or are you going to tell me what to do?" Chapter 17, The Coronation Ball. "I'm not wearing a gown," I said. Conrad blinked. the haze of lust slowly clearing from his eyes, though his hands were still possessively gripping my waist. "Excuse me?" "If I'm walking into that ballroom," I said, my voice gaining strength, "if I'm walking in there as your partner and not your employee, I am not wearing some frothy pastel confection that makes me look like a submissive little debutante. If I'm walking into a den of wolves who want to tear me apart, Conrad, I am wearing armor." He smiled. It was slow, wicked, and devastatingly proud. "You're whatever you want, Darcy. Just wear it next to me." 24 hours later, the limousine door opened, and the flashbulbs blinded me. The noise was deafening. The screams of the crowd, the click of shutters, the shouting of reporters. It was a wall of sound. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had spent my entire career backstage, hiding behind curtains, fixing the beautiful people so they could shine. I had never been the one stepping out into the light. A hand appeared in my field of vision. Large, steady, palm up. I looked at it, then up at Conrad. He was breathtaking. He was wearing the suit, the midnight blue velvet tuxedo I had poured my soul into. It fit him like a second skin, accentuating the terrifying breadth of his shoulders and the tapered power of his waist. He looked like a king. He looked like a god of night and shadows. "Breathe," he commanded softly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Look at me, Darcy. Just me." I took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and anchoring. I stepped out. The roar of the crowd changed pitch. It went from excited screaming to a confused, curious buzz. They had expected a celebrity. They had expected Lady Clarissa. They hadn't expected the tailor, and they certainly hadn't expected what I was wearing. I hadn't lied. I wasn't wearing a gown. I was wearing a tuxedo dress hybrid of my own design. The bodice was structured black silk with a plunging, sharp lapel that mirrored Conrad's own. It was tailored to within an inch of its life, cinching my waist like a corset before exploding out at the hips into a dramatic, floor-length train of black velvet that absorbed the light. I wore stiletto heels sharp enough to be weapons and diamond studs in my ears. I didn't look like a princess. I looked like the CEO of a company that crushed princesses for sport. "They're staring," I whispered as we walked the red carpet, my grip on his hand tightening. "Let them stare," Conrad murmured, bringing my hand to his lips in full view of 300 cameras. "They've never seen perfection before." We reached the massive double doors of the grand ballroom. The royal guard, stone-faced men who looked like they chewed granite, bowed low. "Ready?" Conrad asked, pausing with his hand on the brass handle. "No," I admitted. "Do it anyway." The doors swung open. If I thought the red carpet was loud, the silence of the ballroom was deafening. 500 of the most powerful shifters in the hemisphere stopped talking at once. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and raw, predatory judgment. We stepped onto the mezzanine. "He brought the human," someone whispered. "Is that a tuxedo? Look at his face. He looks obsessed." I kept my chin high, channeling every ounce of Lady Clarissa destroying energy I possessed. Conrad didn't look at the crowd. He didn't acknowledge the council members, the alphas, or the debutantes lining the walls. He kept me tucked firmly against his side, his hand warm on the velvet of my waist, effectively acting as a human shield against the room. We descended the grand staircase. Every step felt like a declaration of war. I saw Lady Clarissa near the champagne fountain. She was wearing red, a terrible, bright poppy red that washed her out completely. Her mouth hung open as she stared at us. I caught her eye and offered a small, cool smile. She looked like she might combust. We reached the center of the floor. The orchestra hesitated, the conductor looking uncertainly at the king. According to protocol, the king was supposed to circulate. He was supposed to shake hands with the elders. He was supposed to act like a politician. Conrad ignored protocol. He turned to me, right in the center of the room, under the massive crystal chandelier. "The first dance is reserved for the queen," I hissed under my breath, panic flaring again. "Conrad, you can't. The council will riot." "I am the council," he reminded me, his voice dark and amused. He placed one hand on my waist and took my right hand in his. He stepped into my space, closing the distance until his thighs brushed against the fabric of my dress. The intimacy of the pose was scandalous. It wasn't a formal ballroom hold. It was an embrace. "Conrad," I warned, glancing at the shocked faces surrounding us. "Everyone is watching." "Good," he growled softly, his golden eyes burning into mine, ignoring the hundreds of spectators as if they were nothing but ghosts. "Let them watch. Let them see who really rules me." He signaled the conductor with a sharp nod. The music swelled, a waltz, heavy and romantic. Conrad pulled me flush against him, and as we began to move, he leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent a shiver straight down my spine. "Dance with me now, Darcy," he promised darkly, "but save your energy. Because when we get back to that dressing room, I'm going to make sure you're too exhausted to walk tomorrow." Chapter 18. The Perfect Fit. I didn't stumble. I didn't blush. I looked the Alpha King in the eye, tightened my grip on his shoulder, and smiled. "Is that a threat, Your Majesty?" I whispered back, my voice steady despite the havoc his promise was wreaking on my pulse. "Because you're forgetting something. I'm the one who designed those trousers. I know exactly how much room you have to move. If you try anything on this dance floor, you'll pop a seam. And then I win." Conrad threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't the polite, courtly chuckle the room expected. It was a rich, booming sound of genuine delight that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The sound shattered the tension in the room. The terrified silence of the council broke, replaced by confused murmurs. The king was laughing. The king, who hadn't smiled in public since the 90s, was laughing because his human date had threatened his inseam. "You're terrible," he murmured, pulling me back into the spin. "I adore you." The rest of the dance was a blur of gold light, velvet, and the heat of his hand burning through the silk of my dress. I stopped seeing the crowd. I stopped seeing Lady Clarissa fuming by the shrimp cocktail. I only saw him. The golden flecks in his eyes, the relaxation of his jaw, the way he looked at me not as a possession, but as a prize he couldn't believe he'd won. When the music ended, the applause was hesitant at first, then thunderous. But Conrad didn't bow to the room. He bowed to me. "And now," he announced, straightening up and offering me his arm. "We're leaving." "Conrad!" I hissed through my teeth, smiling at a gaping Duchess. "We've been here for 11 minutes. You have to do the speeches. You have to kiss babies. You have to intimidate the Western pack." "I can intimidate them via email," he dismissed, steering me firmly toward the exit. "Right now, I have a wardrobe malfunction." "You do not." "I do," he insisted, marching us past the stunned royal guard. "My suit feels constricting. I require immediate professional assistance. It's an emergency." We swept out of the ballroom, leaving the entire social hierarchy of the shifter world in absolute chaos behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the private corridor. Conrad didn't wait for the elevator. He pulled me toward the service stairs, the ones leading back to the VIP dressing rooms. He moved with an urgency that made my breath hitch. He wasn't running, but his stride was long, purposeful, and predatory. "You're insane!" I laughed as he dragged me down the hallway, my heels clicking rapidly on the marble. "You're abdicating your social duties for sex." "I am the king," he growled, pushing open the heavy double doors of our dressing room. "I define what my duties are, and right now, my duty is you." He slammed the door shut and locked it. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound in the world. We were back. The same room, the same trifold mirrors, the same velvet ottoman where I had sat and cried over a hemline just days ago. But the energy had shifted. The air wasn't thick with fear anymore. It was thick with inevitable, crashing desire. Conrad backed me up against the vanity table. He didn't touch me yet. He just looked at me, his chest heaving slightly, his eyes stripping away the tuxedo dress layer by layer. "Take it off," he commanded softly. My breath caught. "Excuse me?" "The jacket," he clarified, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a velvet rumble. "It's tight, Darcy. You said it yourself. I'm popping a seam. Fix it." I looked at him. He stood there, arms slightly spread, waiting. He was giving me the power. He was the most powerful predator on the continent, and he was asking me to dismantle his armor. I stepped forward. My hands were shaking just a little as I reached for the top button of his tuxedo jacket. "You're impatient," I whispered, undoing the button. "I've been patient for 100 years, he rasped. "I'm done waiting." I slid the jacket off his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. A $20,000 garment, discarded like a rag. He didn't care. I reached for his tie. I undid the knot, pulling the silk strip free. I tossed it aside. Then I reached for the shirt. Pearl buttons, fiddly things. I popped the top one, then the second. His skin was hot under my fingertips. I could feel the thrum of his heart, beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "You're racing," I murmured, flattening my palm against his bare chest. "Because you're touching me," he admitted, his eyes fluttering shut for a second as he leaned into my hand. I undid the last button. He shrugged the shirt off. Now it was just skin, muscles, scars, and the low-slung waistband of the trousers I had fought so hard to measure. "Turn around," I whispered. His eyes snapped open. "What?" "Turn around," I repeated, channeling my stylist voice. "I need to check the back. The fit looked a little tight during the waltz." Conrad stared at me. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face. He knew exactly what I was doing. He knew I was playing his game. He turned. I looked at his broad back, the taper of his waist, the power coiled in every line of his body. I reached out, but I didn't measure him. I let my hand drift down to his waist, and then, deliberately, firmly, I pinched him. He jumped, actually jumped. He spun around, his eyes wide, a laugh bubbling in his throat. "You little—" "I told you," I interrupted, stepping into his space, grabbing the lapels of his unbuttoned shirt to pull him down to my level. "I thought you were pinching me that first night. You said you would. I just wanted to beat you to it." Conrad didn't speak. He wrapped his arms around my waist, lifting me up and setting me on the edge of the vanity table, scattering hairpins and fabric swatches everywhere. He stepped between my knees, pressing his forehead against mine. "You win," he whispered, surrendering. "You win, Darcy. You win the argument. You win the game. You win me." "Good," I breathed, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him flush against me. "Because I have some very specific ideas about the alterations this relationship needs." "Oh?" He nipped at my jaw, his hands roaming over the back of my dress. "And where do we start?" I leaned back, looking at him. My king, my wolf, my perfectly tailored disaster. I reached for the measuring tape draped over the mirror, looped it around his neck, and pulled him down into a kiss that promised forever. "We start," I whispered against his lips, "by taking the rest of these measurements. And this time, Conrad, you're not allowed to move." Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Conrad was possessive, you haven't seen anything yet. In this next story, the heroine doesn't just slap the alpha, she physically shoves him out of his chair. And instead of killing her, he pulls her straight into his lap. You need to hear this. Click the video on your screen right now.